Hello, everyone. I'm Matt Clark, research analyst with Money and Markets, here with your weekly marijuana market update. Now, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, get notified each time we post a new video. Now, we've also launched a new membership program here on YouTube that gives you exclusive access to even more cannabis market content. This includes new videos, interviews with cannabis insiders, a monthly live chat with me, blog posts about the movements in the cannabis market, and much, much more. Just click join. You look at it right down there, right in the little title bar there. You can see it. And find out how you can become a part of this great community. Now I'm going to move on with today's podcast. Today, I'm going to answer a reader question about an ETF, which I thought was interesting. I do have several of these kind of backed up, so I'm going to start addressing these more and more. And feel free to send those questions in. You can do so by emailing feedback@moneymarkets.com. Now, Joe recently emailed me and asked, what are your thoughts on MSOS? I saw that the ETF covers a range of cannabis stocks, including some on your watch list. I felt this was a better use of capital instead of holding a larger number of stocks. Thank you for your time, Joe. Well, thank you for your question, Joe, and I'm more than happy to look into MSOS for you. Now, first off, MSOS is the ticker for the Advisor Shares Pure U.S. Cannabis ETF. It's an exchange-traded fund managed by Advisor Shares Trust. It was created back in September of 2020, so it's relatively new. And invests directly and through derivatives in cannabis and hemp companies in the United States. That's where it kind of differs from the YOLO, YOLO, which is another cannabis ETF that's run by Advisor Shares. YOLO invests in global cannabis companies, while MSOS invests only in companies listed on U.S. exchanges. However, only a small portion of YOLO's holdings are actually held outside the U.S. and Canada. Still, there is a bit of a difference. And it does mean, however, that MSOS holdings can be Canadian companies only investing in their U.S. tickers, which could be OTC stocks rather than on Toronto stock or Canadian Stock Exchange, things like that. And MSOS does use derivatives like swaps to create its portfolio. More specifically, MSOS uses total return swaps. This is where the total return of an asset is swapped for a fixed interest rate. For example, you could pay a fixed rate to one person in return for the appreciation and dividend payments for a pool of stocks. It presents what we call a counterparty risk. This is when the counterparty, which is the entity that MSOS or Advisor Shares deals with, can't fulfill its contractual obligation to pay the capital appreciation and the dividends. So there is a bit of a risk here because they are using derivatives to build up their portfolio. Is it a big risk? Not really, but it is a risk that you have to consider before you decide to invest. Now, the top holdings in MSOS right now are Curaleaf Holdings Incorporated, Green Thumb Industries, True Leaf Cannabis, Cresco Labs, and AYR Wellness Incorporated. And Joe is correct. MSOS does hold a few of our cannabis watchlist stocks. Now, the ETF invests primarily in mid-cap stocks. These are companies that have market capitalizations of between $2 billion and $10 billion. About 49% of the portfolio for MSOS are mid-cap stocks. Another 31% of its holdings are small-cap stocks. These are companies with market capitalizations between $300 million and $2 billion. And I think the strategy is more because cannabis companies fall in the range of being mid-cap or small-cap, which really isn't bad. So it's not as if there's a large portion of cannabis companies out there that are large-cap stocks that have 50% of their revenue coming from cannabis or hemp. There's just not a lot of them out there. So mid cap and small cap is not more. It's really not part of it's not really not the strategy. It's more the necessity. And in terms of performance, MSOS has done relatively well over the long term. Its market price return since it was launched in September of 2020 is about 70.5% on an annualized basis. For comparison, the S&P 500 has returned about 19.7% during the same time. However, the short-term performance of MSOS is quite a bit different. In the last 3 months, the ETF has returned about 2% compared to 13% for the S&P 500. To put it in simple terms, if you invested $100 in MSOS when it launched, you'd see a return of about $170.56 compared to $119.76 if you invested the same $100 in the S&P 500 back in September. Now, if you invested $100 in MSOS just 3 months ago, your return would only be around $102 compared to $113 if you invested in an ETF tracking the S&P 500. Those are give or take figures, but you get the idea. So you want to keep short-term return in mind if you haven't invested already in MSOS, but you are thinking about doing so. So make sure you bear that in mind. Now, for comparison, let's look at MSOS against similar cannabis ETFs like YOLO, which is AdvisorShares other cannabis ETF, and MJ, which is the ETF MG alternate harvest ETF. Now, I plotted this on a chart and to take a look. And if you plot all three of them on the same chart, you can see the price movements themselves are fairly similar. And a lot of that is because they're invested in a very similar basket of stocks. There's just not a lot of cannabis stocks out there that meet the threshold that these ETFs want to place on. So you have to bear that in mind, that the price movements are all relatively the same. There are some subtle differences because MSOS only invests in stocks listed on U.S. exchanges. The ETF has missed out on some international cannabis stock gains. Since September of 2020, MSOS has gone up, like I said, close to about 70%. However, both MJ and YOLO have jumped nearly 77% during the same time. It may seem like a small difference, but using the same $100 comparison before, it's about a $7 difference in return. So you kind of have to weigh all that out. You're looking at a 7% difference in terms of its overall return since September. Now, singling out MSOS's stock performance, we can see the ETF reached a high price of around $55 per share back in January of 2021. It's since pared back those gains a bit as the cannabis industry has faced some headwinds due to lack of activity on the U.S. federal legalization front, and its price now is around $41 per share at present. That's give or take. So at the end of the day, you could really do worse than investing in MSOS if you're looking at a broad exposure to the cannabis market. However, in my opinion, you could do better. Just looking at the examples of both YOLO and MJ, they both start at a lower price point. Both have current entry prices at around $22 per share. Plus, YOLO and MJ do have a little bit more exposure to international cannabis stocks. Not a lot, but a little bit more. Their returns have been a bit better, as I described before, about a 7% difference. So the net expense ratio, which is the measure of operating costs to assets, are virtually the same for all three funds. It's about 0.75. This takes the total fund cost and divides it by the total fund assets. Investors look at that to kind of gauge what their return could potentially be, because you have to factor in expenses with ETFs and compare that with dividends and other returns that you might get. So the expense ratio is about the same for all three. So there's not a lot of variance there. And I will tell you that I am looking at one ETF to add to our cannabis watch list in the near future. I'm not really sure when I'm going to add it or which one it's going to be, because I have my eye on a couple of them, but I will let you know. And I do talk more about our cannabis watch list in a separate video that's part of our YouTube membership community. Speaking of which, after a lot of hard work from the team, we've enhanced this community and built a new membership community overall related to cannabis. And before you ask, nothing is really going to change in terms of what you see on YouTube right now. I'm still going to bring you the cannabis market insights each and every week, but we are going to provide even more cannabis insights, information, stocks, and news. This includes exclusive content like interviews with cannabis insiders. You may have seen the video kind of previewing my interview with Tommy Chong. That is available in our membership community. There's also blog posts, company breakdowns, along with content related to our cannabis watch list, and a monthly live chat with me. Those are just some of the things that we're going to be adding, that we've added to this community. And to find out more, just make sure you click that join button right down there, and you can find out exactly what you get for each tier you want to sign up for. If you do have a cannabis stock you'd like me to look at, make sure you email me, feedback@moneyandmarkets.com. We'll drop that email address right down there. You can make sure you click on that and get that email address and email me any questions you might have related to the cannabis market. I'm more than happy to go through those questions and answer them for you. Now, coming up this week, we've got a lot more. We've got the Bull and the Bear podcast, as well as our Investing with Charles series is coming up. Our Ask Adam Anything has already come out. You can check that out on YouTube as well. This is where I get to sit down and ask any question to our chief investment strategist, Adam Odell, that you pose to me by sending me an email or commenting on our YouTube channel. Greens and Fortunes co-editor Charles Sizemore has a weekly series called Investing with Charles Sizemore. He breaks down stocks each week, tells you whether they're good buys for your portfolio or ones you should stay away from. You definitely want to check that out. He's got a great perspective on the broad market. Also, check out moneymarkets.com each and every day. We provide content that is safe, sound, smart, simple, and profitable for your portfolio. I'm Matt Clark, research analyst for Money Markets, your host of the Bull and the Bear podcast and the Marijuana Market Update. Until next time, everyone, safe trading.